Hello and welcome to my channel. Bonjour et bienvenue sur ma chaîne. My name is Muriel and today I will be doing a review of Ursula K. Guin's Always Coming Home. I've already mentioned in a couple of other videos, this isn't quite a novel. It's fiction, definitely fiction. I think the best way to put it is a fictional anthropological field guide thing with poetry, drama as in there are elements of theatre plays in there, short stories. There is a central narrative going through this, a novella I guess you could call it, that kind of threads it all together. It's called Stonetelling Story, stonetelling being the character who tells the story. This is supposed to take place in the future. It's technically science fiction because this is about a people called the Kesh, and the Kesh might have lived in the future. So it's a possible future civilization, and I definitely felt when I was reading this that I was there among them. There's something very elegant and beautiful and simple and harmonious about the way they live, in balance with their environment, with each other. So, like I said, there's not really a story. I mean, yes, there is stone-telling story, basically a coming of age, realizing, oh, how good you have it, / prodigal daughter returns. Because the Kesh are, if you want to put a word on it, I guess you could say it's a anarchist, primitivist society, though with a bit more technology, not that much, but a little bit. Somewhat utopian, though there's a critique of the usage of the word utopian, made through an anthropologist, I suppose, that comes from the past. Never really explained where she comes from, if she has a time machine on hand, but she's visiting the Kesh in the future, and she's almost annoyed at how perfect their society is, but you have Kesh people telling her, no, this is not a utopia, you know, we have our issues and our difficulties. So I think there's kind of a little critique of utopianism going on in there, but I mean, it's pretty nice. As far as utopias go, this is the second most convincing I've ever come across. Of course, by convincing I mean it's one I would actually feel okay living in, which is completely self-serving, I realize, but that's how I evaluate it. So, anarchist, primitivist type of society. I would say inspired by some Native American peoples. I would say it's not matriarchal, it's matrifocal, if you're not really familiar with that term. So in feminist flavored anthropology, the term matriarchal isn't really adequate because it suggests the inverse of a patriarchy, so with women in power and dominating men. But that's not really something that's been observed in human societies. So I've come across the word matrifocal, where the female is slightly central, is very respected for her role as a guardian of life, death, but it's basically meant to be a cooperative society and quite egalitarian, so it's not the inverse of patriarchy. So stonetelling is a young woman. She tells her life story, basically, and for different reasons explained in the story, she wants to go live with her father's people. Her father is not a Kesh. He's from the Condor people, which are heavily patriarchal and martial as well. And to make a long story short, she goes to the Condor, is treated like garbage. Basically, women are soulless animals. Though, I mean, to say that they're animals isn't the insult, because of the Kesh are very, very respectful of animals. They see correctly that humans are animals, and in fact they consider other animal species to also be peoples. So that's not the problem. The problem is they treat women and animals as inferiors. Basically, only the Condor men have souls and are worthy of humanity and respect and blah blah blah, and they have slaves and all nice stuff, basically. And big surprise, she decides, nope, that's not for me, is it? So she gets out of there and goes home and is welcomed with open arms. It's a very simple story. I mean, it's definitely not the best she's ever come up with. It's just an element amongst others describing the Kesh. Technically, this book is divided into a main part and an appendix. Technically, the appendix is purely observational notes on the medicinal practices, the food they will eat, the music, the musical instruments they use, how children are raised, how the passage from childhood to adulthood is conducted, what teenagers have to do and go through, sexuality, marriage, etc. And then the main meat of the book, it's narrative elements. Like I said, it's plays, poems, songs, short stories. So like I said, it's a matrifocal, anarchist, primitivist plus society because it's a post-apocalyptic setting ultimately because you do get here and there references to poisoned environments, toxic waters. They do explain that the Kesh have a very high rate of birth defects and they have degenerative diseases. Overall, they're quite a healthy people. They have a very holistic approach to medicine and it works out quite well for them. But if you do have something, it's something bad and they can't treat it and you basically end up dying from it. And then you have what's called the exchange. That's basically a network of artificially intelligent supercomputers. They communicate with one another over the planet, and then they have stations on the moon and perhaps on other planets in the solar system, but they're not malevolent. It's not the Matrix, right? They're just there. They accumulate knowledge and then maintain their systems. And humans can access the exchange if they so wish. They can input creations by humans, pieces of literature, music, and they can download information if they want. The Kesh don't really care that much though, and that's something that bugged me a bit. Maybe one of the weaker points of the civilization building, I suppose, is that they're not really that fussed about their history or the history of humanity in the greater scheme of things. They have an awareness of evolution and natural selection, so they don't have a religion as such. They don't believe God plonked them on Earth. They're aware that they evolved from simpler life forms and then they share a common ancestor with all life on Earth. But they don't really care about what came before them. They're not really that curious, and I find that very weird. I can understand having, a cultural framework that just doesn't value that, but you always have a few individuals that are just curious about this kind of stuff, I would assume. And they do actually kind of mention them. A couple of people here and there among a generation, they spend their life studying at the exchanges, and so they're kind of intellectual hermits, and that's their jam. But no one in the greater community really gives a toss. It seemed very weird to me, because humans definitely have curiosity about their roots, their origins, or at least that's how I see it. So I said they don't have a religion. They definitely have a faith/spiritual system, very animistic, pantheistic, I would say, which is, I'm all for that representation. But also, they view, for example, deer. Deer are a people, or you have the dog people, the quail people. Basically, any species is a people. They recognize identity, presence, consciousness, being, integrity, dignity, all that, for other species. But they're not vegans either. They eat other animals. They're not vegetarian, but they have a deep respect for life around them, and when they kill something to eat, they do it in a very mindful way. Basically, their whole culture and spiritual belief system revolves around a double spiral, which you can kind of see on the cover here. It's a spiral that goes like this. They call that a Heia If, and everything revolves around that symbol, which is the way they picture the universe, life, death, everything. So it's not religion as such, but they're definitely not atheists either. They're very spiritual, but the spirituality is part of their everyday life. It's coalesced into a whole. They're a holistic people, in every sense of the word. Their medicine as well. Mental health is a thing among them, but it's part of the rest of their health. So they have actually somewhat modern medicine techniques. They do have basic surgical skills, they have contraception, they perform abortions, but they also then have shamanistic medicine, I would call it. The doctors also use songs, meditation, they use psychedelic plants, they use hemp, cannabis. But like I said, of course, the more advanced aspects of medicine that we have today, genetics and stuff, no, that they don't have that. They have a whole concept of ease of living. They don't really think of it as health, they call it living with ease. Oh yeah, and I mentioned, so they have contraception, so yeah, no shaming about women who want to have lots of sex with men. They have abortions. One thing I loved about this is they have a social taboo about having too many children, basically. Now, again, it's not really explained why that is. I guess it's because, they live in harmony with their environment. They're not people about growth. There's no economic growth. There's no expansion, domination of others. We live in sustainable numbers. numbers, it's about sustainability, so we can't afford to breed like rabbits, basically. They believe that if you have more than 2 kids, you're incontinent, and that's frowned upon. And then they also have an acceptance of homosexuality, though I didn't really love the way she had Vikesh call it. Like, a gay man is a woman living man, and a gay woman is a man living woman. I didn't really like that way of phrasing it. And I was like, but what about someone who goes both ways? Where are they? Where's that bisexual representation? And also very interesting, the teenagers. So they have no issues with sex. There's no taboos. I mean, obviously, they don't have sex with children or animals. I mean, okay. But, you know, consenting adults is like, yeah, go ahead, have fun, get married, don't get married. They do have marriage, but it's not like our concept of marriage. I mean, or the historical concept of marriage, which is basically a social contract to ensure property rights. It's spiritual ceremony. And you can divorce, or you can renew your marriage vows after a year if you want. Or if you don't want to live together anymore, the man can go back to the mother's family. Like I said, it's a matrifocal and matrilineal society. So lineage is traced through the mother, and the household is held by the women. So if a man doesn't want to live with his wife or partner anymore, he goes back to the house of his mother, grandmother, what have you. But so teenagers are actually expected to be abstinent for like the duration of their transition from childhood to adulthood. It's also very reminiscent of First Peoples. Adolescence isn't a thing like it is today in our modern Western society. It's really a transitional period that goes by relatively quickly. I mean, from what I gathered, it lasts about a year, a bit more, a bit less. And during that time, you're supposed to be abstinent. In their philosophy, it makes sense that at the most hormonally charged moment of your life, you're supposed to be abstinent so you can concentrate on the maturation of your being. And then once that's over, well, you know, you're a full adult and you participate fully in society. Those are basic elements of the culture. There's still lots of stories in there, but just to highlight what I really enjoyed about the world/civilization building and some of the weaker points. Is it really any surprise that Stone Telling would choose to go back to this rather than a people that wants to make war on everyone else, wants to own slaves, treats their women like soulless pieces of meat? No, not really. And yeah, I think that about sums it up. I mean, you have to experience it. What else can I say? I liked it. I could understand why some wouldn't. It's very different. It's definitely very Ursula K. Le Guin, though. I mean, there are themes in there that you find in actual novels she's written. I think she just wanted to really have fun with this, but have fun in a meaningful way. Her father was an anthropologist, and he wrote, or maybe his wife was like also an author or an English literature professor, but I think together they wrote a book about the last man of his tribe. Ishi, I think, he was the last man of his tribe, his culture, and they wrote down his story, his testimony. So I can understand why she wrote this, why she wanted to explore this. And yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was quite beautiful. And yes, I will be reading quotes from this as well. The fact that it hasn't yet been written, the mere absence of a text to translate, doesn't make all that much difference. What was, and what may be, lie, like children whose faces we cannot see in the arms of silence. All we ever have is here, now. What do? The singers, tale writers, dancers, painters, shapers, makers? They go there with empty hands into the gap between. They come back with things in their hands. They go silent and come back with words, with tunes. They go into confusion and come back with patterns. They go limping and weeping, ugly and frightened, and come back with the wings of the red-winged hawk, the eyes of the mountain lion. Hating gets going. It goes round. It gets older and tighter and older and tighter, until it holds a person inside it like a fist holds a stick. It is with my voice that the blue rock speaks, and the word I speak is the name of the blue rock. It is with my voice that the universe speaks, and the word I hear it speak when I listen is myself. Being is praise. Not that kind of hard and soft, she said. Animals live softly. They don't make it hard to live. Here, people are animals. So the earthly, mortal, human dancers invited that part of their own being which was before and would be after their earthly life. Their soul, or their souls. Not the spirit, the essence of individuality, or not only the spirit, for individuality is mortality, but also the breath soul, that which is shared with, taken from, given back to the wholeness of being, and the self that is beyond the self. So that was my review of Always Coming Home. Next time I will be doing perhaps a 2-part, depending on how long it goes, review of the Earth-Sea cycle. I reread all 6 books. In the meantime, however, I hope you all have a lovely day, or a lovely evening, depending on your time zone, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!